Hello, welcome to or back to me. Today I'm going to be talking about hard books. You may have seen floating around BookTube this trend of people talking about the 10 hard/difficult books that they want to read. First I became aware of this trend was when one of my favourite booktubers, Ian Goobley, posted 10 difficult books that I want to read because I'm insane. It was a great video. If you've not watched it already, I would highly recommend. And that video kind of made me think about the hard books that I'd want to read and make my own video. However, the reason why I said hard in quotation marks is because the books I'm going to be talking about aren't necessarily like objectively hard books. In fact, like some of them are taught in schools. So I know logically I should be able to read them because I'd hope that I'm as smart as the average child at least. But they're books that, whilst I would like to read them at some point, there's something about the book that for whatever reason creates a mental block in my brain that tells me, nah, you can't do this, go pick something easier up. So this list might not look completely similar to other lists you may have seen. Like I'm telling you right now, Infinite Jest and Finnegan's Wake, nowhere on this list. I have no desire to torture myself that much. But you will see some familiar classics. You can probably already guess a couple of the books I'm going to be talking about, but let's just dive right into it. I'm going to start with the book that I'm most likely to read first because there's less standing in the way of me picking it up as other books. It is The Stand by Stephen King. This is one of the most well-known and beloved like post-apocalyptic type novels. You might be thinking, Georgia, why haven't you read this already? You love Stephen King and this is like one of his best books ever, if not the best. And I also like apocalyptic novels, so yeah, it's all adding up, but for some reason I've not picked it up yet. And that reason is purely its length. And if you know me, you'll know that I have a chronic, debilitating case of big book phobia. I've been getting better through like exposure therapy. I have been getting better at reading longer books and appreciating them. But I think it may be because of my ADHD. I find it harder to concentrate on one thing for a long period of time. So if it's a book that I know I'm gonna have to dedicate a week or two to reading, I'm kind of scared to get started because I'm already worried that I'll lose interest partway through and just drop it, which I don't want to happen because if that happens then it might cause a reading slump or whatever. Like I said, I have been reading more longer books recently, but I always need to like have like quite a long break in between them. Like I read it and then I didn't read a long book for a couple months after that because I was like, right, you need a reset, don't tackle a long book at the moment. Like I said, I would really like to get to this one, and I have all the options on this list. It's probably the one that I will read first. Next up, I have the classic The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas. This follows a man who is falsely imprisoned, and then when he gets out, he enacts like a brilliant strategy for revenge against the people that wrongly imprisoned him. It does seem like a novel that'll be right up my street. I love that sort of adventure element that it's got going on. I love a good revenge story. However, you might have noticed it's also a really long one, and what I just said about Stephen King's The Stand also applies, but it's more than just the length for this one. It is an old book, and it's an old French book. Now, I struggle with reading like older vocabulary at the best of times, but then adding in the complication of a translation from another language really scares me. So I know that it's not going to be something that I'll be able to get through quickly. I probably will have to like be Googling definitions of words and trying to wrap my head around all of the language that's going on. So that's like one of the things that scares me about it. And then the last issue kind of like ties into the fact that it's a long book. But I've seen multiple people talk about the fact that it's a really great book and the ending's great, but there's like some sections that are really like slow and you have to slog through. And, you know, I'm a fan of Stephen King. I've read 30 of his books at this point, so I'm no stranger to, you know, having to read pages and pages of what a lot of people would call filler. But the one, like, review that stuck out to me about this book was someone that said, oh, there's like 300 pages in the middle that are really slow and you just have to get through. And I was thinking, 300 pages of slog? That's like a whole novel. So the idea of picking up a book that I know I'm going to have to like get through a lot of boring stuff, again, it just makes me less likely to pick it up because I know it could cause a reading slump if I'm not in the right mood for it. I do hope I'm wrong, and I hope that I fly through the whole thing and love all of it, but you know, that sort of fear is there at the back of my mind. Then I have The Road by Cormac McCarthy. This is one of the books that I mentioned that is regularly taught in schools, mostly in America, so it's not that hard to read. Like, the vocabulary is quite simple. It's about a father and a son and their journey to try and survive in a post-apocalyptic America, which again, the plot sounds fantastic. I love that sort of thing. And the language is simple. I just said that, so why am I not wanting to read it? It mainly comes down to McCarthy's stylistic choices. So first of all, like, there's no chapters in the entire book, which isn't that big a deal for me. I have read a book before that doesn't have any chapters. It was Cujo by Stephen King, and I still did enjoy it, but part of me just adores finishing a reading session at the start of a new chapter, and then I can't do that, and it kind of stresses me out a little bit. So that's the first thing, a small issue. If it was just that, I would read it. But the more pressing issue is McCarthy does not use any punctuation in dialogue or tell you who is speaking at what particular time. And I don't know why, but I struggle with keeping track of dialogue sometimes, just in general. So I don't need writers like McCarthy making it harder for me. That being said, I'm pretty sure I could work through the stylistic choices if I needed to, and the plot does sound really good, so this is why it's kind of on my list to get to at some point. The next entry I debated including in this list at all, because the premise of it was supposed to be 10 hard books that I would like to read, and I'll be honest, I have no real desire to read this. It's actually a series, but I kind of have to. It is the Dark Tower series by Stephen King. I know, please put down your pitchforks. I know this is beloved and loads of people love it. I don't doubt that it's really good, but fantasy as a genre kind of, I don't know, it just doesn't interest me that much. The reason why I have to read it is because I decided that I wanted to do a read every Stephen King book challenge. So obviously these are books that he wrote, so I have to read them even if they're not the most exciting for me. I think my issue mainly with fantasy as a genre is I don't think I'm the most creative person. So when I'm picturing a book in my head and I'm, you know, putting together all the places, the characters, it helps if I've got sort of real life templates to build those scenes off of. And with fantasy, because it's not stuff that I've come across in real life, it's harder for me to do that. So I don't feel as immersed in what's going on. I know I could probably train myself to do that, and I hope that I'll pick up the first in this series and actually really love it and want to read the rest of it, because I don't fancy the idea of reading 7 books that I'm not enjoying. Especially because some of them are quite long. They're fantasy series, so, you know, length kind of comes with the territory. But yeah, the fantasy genre as a whole kind of scares me because I don't know if I have it in me to keep track of every little thing that's going on over that long a period of time. Also a series, I know that technically you do not have to read them one after the other, but in my mind, I worry that if I did take a break between book 1 and then book 2, I'd have forgotten everything that happened in book 1. And I think with like fantasy series like this, it's more important to remember things that happened in the previous books. So I know that if I started book 1, I'd then feel like I had to read them one after the other. And then the idea of dedicating months of just reading, you know, a genre that I'm not too keen on, it doesn't excite me, as you can probably tell. Then I have The Trial by Franz Kafka. So this book is a speculative fiction book that follows a bank worker who's accused of a crime, but he's never told what it is, and he has to navigate this seemingly impossible legal system to try and save himself. I've heard that it's an incredibly powerful book, and the premise really does fascinate me a lot. The writing itself isn't complicated, like the actual, you know, language that's used, but it's more the surrealist writing style that can make it hard to follow. Franz Kafka uses these like techniques to try and emulate the confusion that the main character is feeling, But what it can lead to is, as a reader, you also just having no clue what's going on, which in some ways is really good because, like I said, it does make you feel the confusion and the anxiety that the main character is going through. But yeah, I don't know how I'm going to feel reading a book without knowing anything that's going on. Another thing is that Kafka never finished this book. It was published posthumously. So there's no real like concrete ending. They kind of ended on the last chapter he wrote and it kind of served as an ending, but probably not an ending that makes as much sense as it would have if he had finished writing it. The book promises to be a crazy ride. I just need to make sure that before I start it, I'm in the right frame of mind so that I can try and understand it to the best of my ability. Then I have one of the titans of the literary world, Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. I'm really sorry if I butchered that pronunciation. Crime and Punishment is a psychological novel that explores a young man's sort of motives and consequences for deciding to commit murder and the struggles he faces after as a result from his increasing guilt and remorse for his actions. The book is a lot of things that could scare me. It's long, it's verbose, it's detailed, it talks a lot about Russian culture and history, which I'm not the best versed at, so I probably will have to be doing some research. But the thing that scares me the most is the phrase Russian literature. Now, I don't know if this is just me, but whenever I have heard Russian literature used as a phrase ever, it's always by like English graduates and they're talking about it in a really pretentious way and sort of gatekeeping it really and making it seem like you can only read it if you're really, really intelligent. So in my mind, I've always equated any Russian book to something that I will never be able to understand or comprehend. So this isn't a book that I'd ever thought that I would be able to read, so I kind of need to go against those self-induced prejudices that this isn't a book for me. Up next is Slaughterhouse 5 by Kurt Vonnegut. This book is at its core an anti-war novel, and it kind of blends science fiction with historical fact. Kurt himself was a prisoner of war in 1945, which I think really helps make it a powerful book about ethics and morality. Again, this is a book where the vocabulary itself isn't difficult, it's simple, but the author uses a lot of like postmodernist writing techniques, which can make it hard to follow. Like he uses non-linear narrative, metaphysical like devices, and those kind of things, those kind of techniques do scare me because the idea of having to piece together all these different timelines so that things make sense, the idea of it is enough to give me a headache. I think that when I actually start reading it, I'll realise that it's not as big of a beast as I made it out to be. Again, children read this book in schools, so it's not that difficult. But I haven't read a lot of books that use these sort of more modern writing techniques, so it's something that I'm just going to have to practice and get a bit better at. The next two books are quite different plot-wise, but my reason for being scared of them is pretty much the same. They are Sophie's Choice by William Styron and A Little Life by Hannah Yanagihara. In Sophie's Choice, a man befriends Sophie and over time discovers that she is a Holocaust survivor. And he finds out a lot about her stories and the trauma that she had to go through during these events. And then A Little Life focuses on the unbearable burden of addiction and loss. Neither of the books are difficult from like a prose or language sense, but it's more the subject matter that, makes me reluctant to read them. They're both incredibly heavy, as you can imagine. Very sad, depressing, and as someone who has suffered with a lot of depression in the past, I don't necessarily need help feeling sad ever. The idea of reading something that I know is going to upset me is difficult, but I do want to read both of these books because I do think they have a lot of important things to say. They discuss themes I think I should be reading more about because, like I said, they are very important, but I just need to make sure that I'm in the right mental health space so that I don't completely spiral after reading them. I did see one review of A Little Life that said that under no circumstances should you read this book unless you're 100% mentally stable at the time, otherwise it will destroy you. So yeah, I need to pick my timing with these books a bit carefully. Now this last book might be a little bit out of left field. It's very different to the books that I've talked about in the past, and you might not think it is a book that really interests me too much. But it is the Bible by God / all the different men that wrote the different sections of it. Now, I myself am not religious. I did go to a religious school and attend church kind of regularly, so I know the hymns, I know some of the prayers, I know some of the basic stories. But religion itself, even though it's not something that I really follow, fascinates me to no end. I absolutely love finding out more about religions and, their take on things. And I think that even if, religion isn't something that you follow or practice, there's no denying how important of a cultural and social impact it has had on the human race. So I want to read the Bible so that I can kind of understand more about the people that follow it. The reason why I picked the Bible rather than, another religious text is I'm in the UK, it's a Christian primarily country, so I thought I'd start with that because it's the one that will probably impact me the most day to day. And I know that the stories in the Bible, some of them are quite fun and wild and thrilling, but first of all, it's a ridiculously long book. Whenever you pick one up, the paper is so thin because it's so long, and if it was normal thickness paper, it'd be that thick, the book. So that's one thing. Then the next is it's a ridiculously old book as well. So again, the language used is going to be really difficult to understand. Maybe I could pick up a children's copy, I don't know. That's one thing, I don't know, I know there's different versions of the Bible. I don't know which one is the best, if there can be a best Bible. So I'll have to look into that more. I don't think this is a book that I'm gonna be able to finish anytime soon. It'll probably be one that I will pick up and read different sections at different points, and hopefully by the time I die, I'll have finished all of it. So that is my list of 10 hard books that I would like to read at some point. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the books that I've picked. If you think that some of these books aren't hard at all, please psych me up just so that I know that I can do it. That would be amazing help. Let me know about the hard books that you want to or have read, especially books that you thought were hard and turned out to be easy. That would be really interesting for me to see. Please feel free to like and comment if you want to, and if you've not already, please subscribe to see more videos in the future. Bye bye!